Alright, so in this video we're going to be solving quadratics by using the quadratic formula. So we have for number 1, 2x squared is equivalent to 30 plus 7x. Alright, so the first step would be to get this to be in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equivalent to 0, which pretty much just means that you want to get all the terms to be on your left-hand side, and then on the right side you should have a 0, or vice versa. So to get that format for number 1, let's take away 7x on both of our sides, and then at the same time take away 30. Right, so we now have nothing left on the right-hand side. These 30's cross out and the 7x is also cross out. We have a 0 now. And we have a 2x squared minus 7x minus 30 on the left-hand side. All right, so we now know what the a term is. The a term is a 2, the coefficient of x squared, and the coefficient of x would be the b term, and the c term would be the number at the very end. All right, so once you know what the a, b, and c terms are, then you would plug in these numbers in place of a, b, and c in the formula, which the formula says that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by twice a. All right, and this formula should be memorized. So let's plug in all these numbers. X should be a negative b, which is a negative of negative 7, and then plus or minus the square root of b squared. If the b term is ever negative, make sure to put that in parentheses, because if you ever square some negative quantity, then that becomes positive at the end. Minus 4 times a is a 2, and then times c, which c would be a negative 30. And divide the entire quantity divided by twice a, which a is a 2. All right, and then you would simplify. We have a negative of a negative quantity would be a positive 7, plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared would be a positive 49. And then combine your symbols. Negative times negative would be an overall positive symbol. And 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 30 gives you a 240. Then at the bottom we have a twice 2, which would be a 4. All right, so, and that becomes a 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 240 gives you a 289. And at the bottom we have a 4. Okay. Now we know that the square root of 289 would be a 17, so I'll put that right here. That's 7 plus or minus 17 divided by 4. Once you get to the step, you then can break it up into two different solutions. Since this cannot be further simplified, break it up into 7 plus 17 divided by 4. Or we have the minus version of it, which would be 7 minus 17 divided by 4. All right. So in the first formation, we have a 7 plus 17 gives you a 24 divided by 4, which gives you a 6, and that would be the first solution. And for the second one, we have a 7 minus 17 would be a negative 10 over 4. And this fraction can be simplified if you divide the top and the bottom by 2. And that would be a negative 5/2. All right, so these would be the two solutions for this quadratic. Now, if you solve the same exact problem using the factoring process, then you should get the same two solutions at the end. Why do we have the formula? Because sometimes we cannot solve by factoring, and that's where we resort to using the formula. No matter what type of an equation you have that's a quadratic, you can solve it by using this formula process. All right, so that's number 1. Now, number 2, we're given that 2x squared plus 12x is equivalent to negative 5. So for this quadratic, if you try to solve this by factoring, you'll see that this is not solvable by factoring because you cannot factor this. This is one prime example of where you have to resort to using the formula to solve your quadratic. So the first step would be to bring over the 5 to your left-hand side to get a 0 on the right. We now have a 0 on the right, which was your motive, and we have a 2x squared plus 12x plus 5 on the left-hand side. All right, and then again, all you would do would be to substitute all the a, b, and c terms in your formula. So x would be a negative b, which means negative 12, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 12 squared, minus 4 times a times c, which c would be a 5, and then at the bottom we have a twice the quantity of a, and again a would be a 2. All right, so then simplify this as much as you can. We have a negative 12 plus or minus. The square root of 12 squared should be a 144. And then we have a minus 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 5 gives you a 40. Divided by twice 2, which is a 4. All right, and that gives you a negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus 40 gives you a 104. And then at the bottom we have a 4. All right, so in the previous example, we square rooted the number that's in the radical to get an integer value at the end. Can we square root 104 to get an integer? We can't. So in this step, if you can simplify your radical, then try that first, right? If you cannot simplify, then you stop right there and plug it into your calculator to get the 2 decimal solutions. But for this one, we can simplify 104 in the radical. 104 is divisible by the perfect square of 4, right? So we have a negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 104 divided by 4 is a 26. So we have 4 times 26 divided by 4. All right, so again, we broke up 104 into 4 times 26 because 4 is a perfect square quantity and it's a factor of 104. All right, so, and how that helps us, we now have a negative 12 plus or minus. The square root of 4 comes out as a 2, and then in the radical remains a 26. And then at the bottom we have a 4. All right, so we simplified our radical, and from here, check if we can simplify the overall solution. So negative 12 and 2 and 4, all three of these numbers are even, right? So we can divide all of them by 2 to simplify the overall solution. And negative 12 divided by 2 gives us a negative 6. Then 2 divided by 2 gives you a 1, radical 26. And then at the bottom we have a 4 divided by 2 gives you a 2. All right, and this would be the solution for our quadratic. And we can break it up into like 2 different solutions where x1 would be the plus version. We have a negative 6 plus the square root of 26 divided by 2. And then x2 would be the minus version, which x2 would be a negative 6 minus radical 26 divided by 2. All right, and if you want to further get the decimal solutions, then you just have to plug these numbers into the calculator to get the decimal solutions, and that'd be it. We simplified as much as we can, so these are as simplified solutions as we can get. Okay, so number 3, we have a 5x squared plus 1x is equivalent to 1. All right, so same process. If you bring the 1 over to your left-hand side, then that gives you a 5x squared plus 1x minus 1 is equivalent to 0. All right, so now a is a 5, b is a 1, and c would be a negative 1. So x would be a negative b, again, that's negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 1 squared, and then minus 4 times a times c, which is a negative 1, divided by twice the quantity of a, which is a 5. Then simplify this as much as you can. We have a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared is a 1, and then negative times negative is an overall positive, and 4 times 5 is a 20, times 1 gives you a 20, and then at the bottom we have a twice 5, which would be a 10. Okay, so, and then simplify this even more, which you have a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 21 divided by 10. And we cannot simplify the number within our radical, which is a 21. So we would stop right there. And we can break it up into 2 different solutions, a plus solution and the minus solution. But that's if you want to get the decimal answers for this quadratic. All right, so number 4. We have a 4x squared minus x plus 4 is equivalent to x plus 7. All right, so again, we have a bunch of terms scattered all over the place. You want to make this organized by getting all the terms to be on one side. Let's take away 1x, and let's take away a 7 on our sides. And these terms cross out, and we have left a 4x squared. And then negative 1x minus 1x gives you a negative 2x. And then we have a 4 minus 7 gives you a negative 3. And then we have a 0 on the right side. So you want to plug all these terms in place of a, b, and c in our formula once again. X would be a negative b, so negative of negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c, divided by twice a, which a would be a 4. All right, so simplify that. And we have a negative of negative, again, would be an overall positive. Be careful with your integer symbols. Plus or minus, we have the square root of negative 2 quantity squared would be a positive 4. And then negative and negative gives you an overall positive symbol. 4 times 4 is 16, times 3 gives you a 48, divided by twice 4, which gives you an 8. All right, and that gives you a 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 48, which would be a 52, divided by 8. All right, and once again, we cannot square root 52 to get a integer value, so you would simplify the radical as much as you can. 52 would be divisible by the perfect square quantity of 4, and we have a 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 13, divided by 8. All right, so we know what the square root of 4 is. It's just 2. So 2 plus or minus twice radical 13. Again, the square root of 4 becomes a 2, and then the 13 remains in the radical itself. And then at the bottom, we have an 8. All right, so now every quantity, we have this 2 over here, this 2 over here, and that 8 over there. Every quantity would be divisible by the common factor of 2. Right, so divide every factor by 2. We have 2 divided by 2 would be a 1. And then we have a plus or minus 1 radical 13 divided by 8 divided by 2, which would be a 4. And this, or these would be the two solutions for our quadratic. All right, so 2 more left. We have number 5. 5x squared plus 9x is equivalent to negative 4. All right, practice makes perfect, so the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. If you bring every term over to one side, we add 4 on both of our sides, and that gives you a 5x squared plus 9x plus 4 is equivalent to 0. All right, and then x is negative b, so that would be a negative 9. And then plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by twice a, which again a would be a 5. And then you simplify this as much as you can. We have this negative 9 plus or minus. From here, it's just PEMDAS. So 9 squared is an 81. And then we have a minus overall symbol, and 4 times 5 is a 20. Times 4 gives you an 80. Divided by twice 5, which would be a 10. All right, so negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 80 would be a 1. At the bottom, we have a 10. And we know what the square root of 1 is, which would just be a 1. So negative 9 plus or minus 1 divided by 10, and that would break up into two different solutions, one of which would be a negative 9 plus 1 divided by 10, and the other one which would be a negative 9 minus 1 divided by 10. All right. In the first case, we have a negative 9 plus 1 gives you a negative 8 over 10, and that would simplify to a negative 4 over 5, and that's your first solution. And the other one would be a negative 9 minus 10, that gives you a negative 10 divided by 10, and that would be a negative 1. All right, and these would be the two solutions for number 5. All right, and last one, number 6. We have a 2x squared minus 3x minus 15 is equivalent to 5. All right, so same process. If you take away 5 on both of your sides, we end up with a 0 on the right side, and that was your motive. And we have a 2x squared as is minus 3x. And then negative 15 minus 5 gives you a negative 20. And then the a term is a 2, the b term is a negative 3, and the c term is a negative 20. All right, so plug them in. We have x would be a negative b, so negative of negative 3. And then plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and the entire quantity divided by twice 2. All right, so Now, negative of negative would be an overall positive 3, plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared would be a positive 9, and then negative times negative is an overall positive symbol. 4 times 2 would be 8, and 8 times 20 would be a 160, divided by twice 2, which is a 4. All right? And that becomes a 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 160 would be a 169, divided by 4. We know what the square root is for 169, 13, right? So we have 3 plus or minus 13 divided by 4. And that breaks up into the first solution, which would be 3 plus 13 divided by 4. And the second solution would be 3 minus 13 divided by 4. All right, in the first case, we have 3 plus 13 would be a 16 divided by 4, and that gives you a 4 as your first solution. And 3 minus 13 would be a negative 10. Over 4 would be a negative 5 halves upon simplifying that. And these would be the two solutions for our quadratic.